Hey everybody, thanks for joining me again for yet another Allan Holdsworth lesson video in my SynthAxe series, I suppose. And today I wanted to talk about one of my absolute favorite Allan Holdsworth tunes, Distance vs. Desire. And it's pieces like this that always make me think of Allan more like a composer that played guitar than an actual guitarist. And a few years ago I did a transcription of this, and I put like a little playthrough kind of thing where you can read the tablature, because I didn't think I ever was going to be able to do a video and demonstrate it, because I transcribed it a long time ago. But now that I have the SynthAxe, I'm excited to actually show it, and that's probably about 85% of the reason why I actually bought the SynthAxe, is to actually play this. And we've already done two tracks before, Looking Glass and Non-Brute Condiment, and showed how Allan was able to modify them to play them in standard tuning so he can continue playing them. But now we're going to start doing tunes that are pretty exclusive to the SynthAxe. Plus, also having all the frets the same distance apart allows you to get really high up on the neck, which would be really difficult on a regular neck guitar, because all the frets get smaller up as you go higher. And I actually first started transcribing this because I sort of nicked Joe Britton's transcription of the head part, and he's the best transcriber I know. So thank you, Joe. And I just modified what he did a little bit. It just changed the chords around, some of the voicings a little bit. But this was also the first instance where I saw not only did Allan switch from standard to fifths tuning, and with one of the SynthAxe pieces, but also on the same chord. So we'll see that a bit later, again, to show you why these pieces are really hard to adapt for a real guitar. So let's get started. Distance vs. Desire appears to have been written in mid-1986 and is one of the rare Allan Holdsworth tunes where there's no drums or bass, so Allan's basically just duetting with himself, just playing on top of chords. The first performance of this tune with the band seems to have been about October of 1986, when he was opening up for Chick Corea as a trio. That was the same tour I've talked about where they had played with backing tracks, but there appears to be an earlier public performance of it. In order to help promote the SynthAxe, Allan would often do clinics for them around the country, and longtime fan Joe Biela had shared that he attended one of these clinics on September 13th, 1986, I believe at Gan Music Store. It was called Gan Music Tech 86, and said that Allan played Distance vs. Desire, and he produced a picture where Allan's playing the SynthAxe, and he's clearly playing a chord from the tune. With that information in mind, it's possible that Distance vs. Desire was written as a showpiece for the SynthAxe for these clinics. And since Allan's doing all the work, I'm pretty sure he was using a backing track, so he would play the head chords, and then when he got to the point where he had to solo, would turn on the backing track and then solo over it. And this also makes sense because a month later, when he went out on tour, he was using the same backing tracks to play over, because he was only a three-piece at the time. What's really unfortunate is Joe also shared that he recorded the entire clinic on video and lent the tape out to somebody that asked for it, and he never got it back. And what's upsetting about that is that there's no good live footage of Allan playing Distance vs. Desire. There's one in 1988, but you can barely see what's going on, so maybe one day, hopefully, that tape will surface. But for now, there's no good live footage of it. So after the late 1986 tour where Allan played Distance vs. Desire with a backing track, it was recorded for the Sand album, I believe, in early 1987. Then, when Allan went back out on tour in May of 1987 in Europe to open up for Stanley Clarke, he was still a trio and did not have a keyboard player. So that's where he got Steve Hunt, who was Stanley Clarke's keyboard player, to fill in on some tunes. So even though they played things like Looking Glass or Pud Wood, they did not play Distance vs. Desire for that tour. Once Steve was firmly in the band by September of 1987 and they went back out on their US tour, it was back on the set list. And in those instances, Allan would play the opening chords by himself, and then once it switched over to the solo section, he would start to solo and Steve would take over the chords. It was performed for about another year, and the last performances of it seemed to be July and August of 1988, when he was playing with Vinnie Colaiuta. And there's no recordings of it, I believe, from 1989. If there is, I haven't heard it. So I think the last time that it was played live was around August of 1988. The sound that Allan used to perform Distance vs. Desire is a string-like sound, and because Oberheims are known for their string and brass sounds, he'd use the Oberheim Matrix 12. He might have used the expander, but I don't think so, because the Matrix 12 has twice the amount of voices as the expander, so the strings sound much bigger and lusher than the expander. Now, Steve Hunt had shared that when he played the chord part live with Allan, he also was using the Matrix 12, and Allan gave him the same patch, but it actually sounded different because when Allan played the SynthAxe, he was processing those sounds through his guitar rig, so it went through the same kind of EQ and delay and compression, all that stuff. So it sounds different, but it's actually the same patch. For the solo sounds that Allan used for the track, I'm unsure what he used because he had never publicly expressed what he used. I'm going to guess it's probably a blend of a Yamaha TX7 with either the Oberheim or the Kurzweil. Either it's the Matrix 12 or the K250. But he never brought the K250 out on tour, and I think when he would perform live, he wasn't really blending those sounds together. And live, the sound is a little bit different than what's on the record, so I'm going to guess that it might just be the Yamaha TX7, and of course using the breath controller for more expressiveness. And on that note, Allan actually said that he wasn't really too happy with the sound that he actually got for the record, which I think is crazy because I think it sounds amazing. But he was really impressed with how expressive the SynthAxe is, and even more so than maybe a guitar. Speaking of the solo, Allan actually gave incredibly rare praise in an interview about it, saying that there were certain parts of it that he almost liked. And for the sound that I'll be using, I'll also be using a Matrix 12 VST, which was programmed by Luigi Masella, so thank you again. There is a patch that comes default on the Matrix 12 VST called Famous, which is really close, but Luigi just changed it a little bit to be more accurate to the record. So that's everything about the sound and its history. Let's get to the solo section. Now I want to talk about the solo a little bit, which can be a little controversial, but I just want to tell it like it is and the things that I've seen, and now owning the SynthAxe, understanding it a little bit better. Now, when Allan first used the SynthAxe on a Tapracron, he only used it for 2 solos. He used it for Non-Brew Condiment and All Our Yesterdays, which both are in 5th tuning, and also without the breath controller, which he got in the early months of 1986. In an interview, Allan had stated because of the way that he used the breath controller, he could not record direct MIDI with it. He had to record it analog, or basically using a cabinet that was mic'd. Now this is important because, as I said on the other 2 tunes, the tunings for the solo are just in 5ths, but starting on Sand, not only did he use the breath controller for a lot of those solos, but the tunings within the solos started to change as well. Now what that means is that those solos were kind of stitched together from different takes, or it's possible that Allan sort of did it piece by piece. He would play up to a certain part and then start again, maybe in another tuning for the next part, and going back and forth between them. So here are some examples of some of the lines from the solo, and I'll describe what the tuning actually is. And all of these lines can be found not only in my lick pack that I have available for purchase, but also I think some of them, not all of them, but probably a good amount of them also appear in my Looking Glass book, where I talk about all the different patterns and phrases and how Allan sees the scales and all the tunings, etc. So here are some excerpts from the actual solo. Now, of course, these tunings can be programmed on the SynthAxe console, but the thing is they have to be programmed ahead of time, meaning you have to know what tuning you want to use before you play it. Because using the foot switch, you can only scroll through the banks you have in forward or backwards in whatever order you set them at. It sort of can't be done randomly depending on how you want it. I mean, you can, but you actually have, if you do it that way, you actually have to press on the console what tuning basically or what bank you want to play. But in a live situations when you're actually playing, you can really only scroll forward and backwards between the preset banks that you ordered ahead of time and move through them forwards and backwards. Eventually I'll do a video on how the SynthAxe works and you'll get a better idea. So with that in mind, it made me realize that he was probably stitching together these solos sort of part by part. And again, that doesn't demean or mean that he's a bad player. He's just trying to give the best solo possible for the record. And again, live, he never used any of these like really weird tunings except for one show. I'll do a video about that in the future, and only for 2 solos, 2 little parts. But for the most part, when he was playing the SynthAxe live, he was never switching between you know, fourths and fifths and standard and an octave higher or whatever. It was always standard live. Another interesting tidbit is that the last phrase that you hear on the record is actually written out. Allan performs that line every time, at least that I've heard, every live performance that I've heard of it. There's maybe about like 8 or so through the different years. It always performs that line at the end of the solo. So interesting that that part is actually written out. So that's everything I've got to say about the actual solo sound and how the solo is constructed. Now I want to talk about the form. So as I said before, just in case you skip past it, is that this tune is basically impossible to play on a real guitar because it uses 2 main tunings. It uses fifths, but only for like a little brief part at the end of the head, which also comes back at the end of the tune itself. But a majority of it is not only written in standard, but it's standard tuning an octave lower. So that makes it practically impossible to play it on a guitar. And even again, if you had a baritone guitar neck and a fifths neck, a lot of the chords are so high up on the neck that they would be basically impossible to reach. Now the way that the tune is constructed is very stereotypically Allan. It starts off basically with moving the same shapes up and down the neck and slightly different variations of those shapes. And then once it gets to the solo section, I like to think of the solo section as 3 main parts, an A part, a B part, and a C part. And each of those sections, A, B, and C, are sort of split in half. So there's 2 sections for A, 2 sections for B, and basically 2 sections for C. So the A and the B parts of the solo section are very similar. Again, they're not really related to the head, but they do have little parts of it at the end of both of those sections, which is something similar that we've seen in other Allan tunes like Looking Glass, where a lot of the chords are sort of unique, but are somehow related to the head part. And then the C part has the first few chords are like the solo sections that we've seen before it, but the majority of it is the ending of the head, and that leads to the ending part of the tune. So I would say that if you learn the head chords and you learn the A section, you'll have a majority of the tune already finished, because everything else that comes before it is either a reprise or it's a slight modulation of one of the sections that we did already. So again, this sort of makes the Allan tunes a little bit easier, is that sometimes you get a section of it and then you can kind of get the rest because it's somehow related or modulated. The one last interesting thing I wanted to talk about were the chords themselves. Usually when Allan plays a 4-note chord or 4 or more note chord, every note is unique. He doesn't double a note. This tune has more chords with a double note than I think any others. And what I mean by that, there's like 2 B notes an octave apart. Not that they're unison, but they're an octave higher. So they'll have 1 B and then a B an octave higher. And that's really rare for Allan. Not sure particularly why, it's just that this tune has a lot of them in there. So that's everything I want to talk about. Now let's get down to actually learning it. So before we get started, I want to talk about how the keys actually work on the SynthAxe, because that's how Allan's actually playing Distance First Desire, using the keys here. So on a Tavachron, a majority of the pieces are actually played with the trigger strings here. But afterwards, Allan started playing with the keys, and pretty much from almost all of his chord playing was using the keys here. And each key represents a string. So this is the 6th string, or at least this instance, the low E string. So it goes 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, or E, A, D, G, B, E. Of course, no matter what you tune to, it doesn't make a difference. You're always going to get those keys to be associated with that string. Then we have these group triggers here, which is just the top 3 strings and the bottom 3 strings. I don't think Allan ever uses this, and if he does, it's impossible to tell because you can just play the notes with your finger. But what he does use is this master trigger here, which plays all 6 strings at the same time. And he'll be using that, and I'll mention where that stuff is being used. Now, the other thing that I wanted to mention is how the keys actually work when you're playing, and this is what makes this tune basically impossible on a real guitar. Okay, so let's say I'm going to play this high E here, and I press the first trigger key. The note rings out, and I lift my finger, and it dies, as like a normal guitar would. But what I can do is, if I keep that key down, the note still rings out. Even so, if I move my finger to another fret, it still rings out. And even what I can do is, if I play a different note entirely and lift my finger, it's still playing that original note until I take my finger off. And these are the things that Allan actually uses when he's composing, and we'll see a couple of these things later in the piece. Again, the other thing that makes this piece impossible on a real guitar is that a majority of the piece is in standard tuning, but an entire octave down. Now, I might have said whole step before or something like that earlier, because I don't know why I just had verbal diarrhea, but it's an octave down. E, A, D, G, B, E. And then we'll switch to fifths tuning, which I'll talk to when I get there. So here's the first part of it. So the head starts off with this minor 7 sharp 5 shape. In this case we have C sharp minor 7 sharp 5. We have the C sharp, the sharp 5, the minor 3rd, the flat 7, and then again we have the minor 3rd. We have 2 of the same notes here. We have an octave. There we go. So like I said, that's pretty unusual for Allan. So it's the same shape for C sharp minor 7 sharp 5. That moves up to F sharp minor 7 sharp 5, and then moves down to B minor 7 sharp 5. And that chord is a little bit longer. It's like 7 beats longer, but this is all rubato, which basically means in free time, so you can hold it as long or as short as you want. But typically each one of these chords is a little bit longer. So now that we play that C sharp minor 7 sharp 5, the next chord, Allan moves his 2nd and 3rd finger up a half step. And now what that does is we change the root and the minor 3rd, so now we're playing a D and an F with the 1st and pinky still playing the same note. And now this is a D minor 6/9 chord. And it's the same thing where we're moving up a 4th and then down, I think, a 5th. So this is D minor 6/9, G minor 6/9, C minor 6/9. So there I was actually using the trigger strings. Now I'm going to be using the group trigger strings, and Allan plays this add 9 voicing, which we've seen before. I talked about this in funnels. This is a B flat add 9 chord, and all the strings are being played. So he's using the group trigger here. That then moves up to E flat add 9, and then down to A flat add 9. And now it's hard. It's really hard to hear, but now that major 3rd, the C here, goes down to I guess technically C flat or B, and that's the minor add 9. So you hear something like this. It's really hard to hear, but it's in there. So that whole first section starts off like this. back to a variation of that chord that we had just played, just like the minor 7 sharp 5, but now that sharp 5, the A, moves down a half step to G sharp. So now this is just a plain old C sharp minor 7 in this crazy voicing, again with that doubled note. So C sharp minor 7, F sharp minor 7, B minor 7. This voicing is a little tricky for me, because of where it is on the neck. I got to stretch my fingers a little wider. Then we get to this next interesting chord. It's like the A major add 9, but what's happening here is the E, or the 5th, is moving down to the sharp 11. So instead of having two E's now, we now have a D sharp and an E. So this is a major add 9, add sharp 11. Again, using the group trigger strings to hit all at the same time. That moves up to A, so A add 9, add sharp 11. And then the last chord is G add 9, the group trigger. Now, not the sharp 11, just a regular add 9. And again, what's interesting, this is what I got from Joe Britton that opened up my eyes, is that with that same shape, we now move to 5th tuning. Again, I'm going to use the console here. And we play the same shape, and now with 5th tuning, it's an E flat major 7. Same shape, but completely changed the context of the chord. Now we're in 5th tuning, and this is the ending of the head section. So this sequence here is pretty much like one of my favorite chord sequences that Allan ever wrote, and that's why I bought it, because you got to play it in fifths with this whole weird thing. So the first chord that Allan plays after that E flat major 7 is now it goes to an F sharp dominant 9 sharp 11. Anytime I have a dominant with a sharp 11, Lydian dominant, we're now talking melodic minor. So this is an F sharp dominant 9 sharp 11. We have our root, the 9, the flat 7, which is E here. We have the sharp 11 C, and then we have a B flat. I'm sorry, yes, or an A sharp, because we're playing an F sharp, which is the major 3rd. And then the next chord is a G sharp minor with the 5th, and it's very similar to this minor shape here, which we've seen before. We just talked about just a regular minor triad, 1, 5, 3, and then the root again. But in this case, Allan just moves, just plays the top part of that here. So that's G sharp minor. Then that chord sequence moves up a minor 3rd, so now we're playing an A dominant 9 sharp 11 to a B minor. And that last chord up there is a C 9 sharp 11. Then the chord shape moves down here to an E flat minor major 7 sharp 11, now using the group trigger to play all the strings. And then Allan moves his pinky from the sharp 11 to the 5th here, so then it becomes a regular E flat minor major 7. Moves that all the way up to the 15th fret, which is now A flat, and does the same thing. So A flat minor major 7 sharp 11, with the sharp 11 going to the perfect 5th. But now what happens is Allan starts to remove and add notes in this really cool sequence. So A flat minor major 7 sharp 11, sharp 11 goes to the 5th, the minor 3rd goes to the sus2, the pinky plays another A flat. Now the pinky lifts off to the major 3rd. So then it becomes like an A flat major 9. Then Allan pretty much bars with his first finger on the 13th fret and uses his pinky to pretty much voice it at the same note. And this is an F sharp 6-9 chord. And then your first finger moves down a minor 3rd while still holding the A flat on the top, and then you have a it was a D flat 6-9 add 11 chord. love that resolve. It's like so tensiony, but it just resolves so perfectly. And this chord, we're looking at a fifth, a fifth, a fifth, a fifth, and I don't even know what this is. What is that? That's a G to a flat 9. So trying to play that chord on the piano is, I think, pretty much impossible unless you got hands like Rachmaninoff or something. I think Steve Hunt even mentioned about like the impossibility of playing this chord because it's so wide on the keyboard, and that's what you get with fifths tuning. So that whole section in fifths again. That's the only fifth part. That part comes in at the very end, but now we're at the what I consider the A solo section. So, as I've said earlier, I think of the solo section as having three main parts, an A, a B, and a C section, and each section is sort of split in two. I'm going to do the first half of the A section now, and what's great is once you learn that, all the other sections are basically just variations of that, whether they modulate or they move somewhere else. So once you've got this section down, again, you'll have a majority of all the other sections. Again, the C section starts out like this and then pretty much goes to the ending that we had just done in fifths tuning. So again, we're in standard tuning, an octave down. I keep on wanting to say a whole step because my band plays a whole step down, but this is an octave down. And the first chord is a chord that we see Allan often play, a major 7 sus2, but this one's a little bit different. Now, when Allan plays these types of chords, he likes to bar with his pinky, and I'll do that as well. But he has really good pinky barring abilities, where he can also play the high E string, and he always does like this major 7 sharp 5 chord. He'll like to bar with his pinky. I can't do that and play the high string with this, and that's what makes it unique, is that Allan's playing a low A and a high A. And that's something, again, you don't see often because we get this minor second on the top, and that really stands out. If you remove it, it just doesn't sound right. So we have this A major 7 sus2 chord, and I'm going to use my third finger to bar. Hopefully I don't mess this up too bad. Like that. So we've got the root, the sus2, the fifth, the major 7, and then the root again. And putting that all together, that's really tricky. So that's the first chord, A major 7 sus2. The next chord is an F sharp minor 7, but with the flat 13. Looks like this. So once we in my instructional video about how Allan solos, I said he likes to do things where he plays this little pentatonic line, like, and how that note is a half step down. Well, Allan abuses that here because if you try to play it the other way, you get something like this. Yeah, that's like the top part of this chord is the same that we've seen in Out From Under, but again, it's just easier to expose the G and the B string being a major third apart. So what I can do is I can move this D note down a half step to C sharp, and then the C sharp up to D, and then I have this same exact voicing, just easier to play, and that's what Allan's doing here because he's playing an F sharp on the lowest string, and trying to play it like this is unnecessarily hard. Again, there's no video footage. You could do it, but I'm guessing it's probably this, and it's much easier. So we have an F sharp minor 7, but now we're adding in a D there, and that's the flat 13. So I'm going to call this an F sharp minor 7 flat 13. No double notes there, but then the next chord it goes to a D minor 11. And there we have a double note because we have two flat 7s. We have two C's here. But yeah, we have the root, the flat 7, the minor third, the flat 7 again, and then the 11 on the top. So, and then it it moves down to C sharp minor 7 with the flat 13, same voicing we saw before. These are all voicings we're going to see throughout the piece. Then after that it goes to F sharp minor 11. And then the same chord that I talked about in Looking Glass, where we have that, what I call the G sus2 sharp 11, with the A in the bass. So it's really like an A11 chord because we have the root, flat 7, the major third, the 11, and then the root again. Once again, 2 A's. Then that moves to it's not that it's that interesting, but I'm going to view this as a D major add 9 because it's built like this, but we have this chord here, but with the A in the bass. So we have A and another A. But when I see this kind of shape here, my mind goes to D major add 9. So I'm thinking of it, even though there's no D there, a D major add 9. And the next chord is just a regular D minor 7. Like that. So this is that whole section that we just played. Now here's the second half of the A section. So the second half of the A section starts off the same way with the A major 7 sus2. But now instead of F sharp minor 7 flat 13, it's G sharp minor 7 flat 13. Then it goes to E flat minor 11, F minor, then the F minor 7 flat 13. Then we get this F minor 9 voicing, which is new. And it's played like that. It's played with the with 4 notes, and then the 9 is added afterwards. Again, we have a doubled flat 7 there. So F sharp minor 9. And then it moves to a G sharp minor 7 flat 13. And then the last chord of that section is, well, the last chord of that little part of this these new chords is this A major add 9 with all 5 strings being played, not 4. So we have 2 E's here. And then from there we now go to the little part of the head that I talked about before, where it's just the minor 6 over 9 chord. So the first chord is D minor 6 over 9. Just the same thing, D minor 6 over 9. G minor 6 over 9. C minor 6 over 9. That repeats again. Interesting is that when the solo happens, that first chord, D minor 6 over 9, Allan treats as melodic minor, but then the C and the G and the C afterwards treats as Dorian. Again, it's what happens when you sort of analyze a solo, because melodic minor would work for all 3, Dorian would work for all 3, or you can combine them any way you want, but that's what he does. And then again, the next 3 chords are the same thing that we saw before, the B flat major add 9, E flat major add 9, A flat major add 9, and then minor 9. That's the whole A section. Now we're going to go on to the B section. So the good news about the B section is that first half that we played for the A section is pretty much the first half of this B section. Only the last chord there's a slight variation of, but it's still in the same wheelhouse. So first chord again, A major 7 sus2, F sharp minor 7 flat 13, D minor 11, C sharp minor 7 flat 13, F sharp minor 11, A11, D major at 9. And here's the different part. Instead of playing a D minor 7, it's a D minor 9, the Allan voicing that he loves. That's the first half. Second half starts off the same way, A major 7 sus2. And then to a G minor 7 flat 13. just like before, but now here, instead of going to E flat minor 11, it goes to E minor 11. But now that flat 7 moves to the 13, so it goes from D to C sharp. There's a little melody there. And then E flat minor 7, flat 13. That same idea now gets modulated up to G sharp, so now it's a G sharp minor 11, and then with that flat 13 melody. And then again B flat minor 7 with the flat 13. Voice leading with that same note like we saw before, and now instead of A add 9, it's now B major add 9. And then after that, Allan actually continues holding the note with his fingers, but then plays the open A. The A is really low in the bass. I mean, I guess you can think of it as A being the root, but I'm just thinking of that he's adding the flat 7. And then again, we get the same ending as before with the D minor 6 over 9, G minor 6 over 9, C minor 6 over 9. And here's where it's different again. Back to D minor, G minor. But now for the C one, on the backing track and the record, Allan does this. The first time Steve Hunt played this in '87, he doesn't do this part, but I believe in '88 he does. And while you're holding out that C minor 6 over 9 chord, your pinky's holding down the D up there. And what's happening is you're going to be taking your first, third, and fourth finger and moving that up a whole step. And then that whole step again. All while you're holding your pinky down over that D. So it's a little weird, but it's like this. So again, you only have your you're holding down that note with your pinky on the trigger string, and then you're just moving your fingers elsewhere while that note still rings out. So you wouldn't be able to do that at all with the SynthAxe. And then it goes back to the B flat major add 9, E flat major add 9, and then A flat major add 9, going to the minor 9. So that's that whole section. I'll play it here, and then we're going to move on to the C section. Again, the good thing about the C section is a majority of it is what we've already seen before. There's only one really unique chord in here, and it's not too bad, but everything else, it starts the same way as the A section. So we've got that A major 7 sus2 chord, F sharp minor 7 with the flat 13, D minor 11, but now here it goes to this E minor 7 shape. Again, now we have these two D's in there, but now the melody goes from D, then to C, then to B, so like this. Now instead of an F sharp minor 9 that we saw before, it now goes to G minor 9, and then to an A minor 7 sharp 13, A minor 7 flat 13. It's like a variation of what we saw before, but now instead of those add 9s, we now have a major 7 sus2, sus2 sharp 11, B flat sus2 sharp 11. And then the fifth fifth of that chord, that F again, now again, two Fs in here, gets played again. Oops. Then we go back to the head, but we go back to where it was from the minor 7. So now C sharp minor 7, F sharp minor 7, B minor 7, the A add 9, add sharp 11, the D major add 9, add sharp 11, G major add 9, and then again move up to the 5th tuning lilt part, like that. Then it's the same section as before with the 9 sharp 11. So F sharp dominant 9 sharp 11, G sharp minor, A9 sharp 11, B minor, C9 sharp 11, and then it ends with the E flat minor major 7 sharp 11. That. I think on the record what ends up happening is while that chord is being held down, it goes back to regular standard tuning and you just hear like, just for like a brief second. I forgot what chord that is. I think it's some, it's another like major 7 sharp 11 because we've got D, G, C sharp, another G, a B, and then a D. Yeah, so I think it's just a weird voicing of a G major, then add sharp 11. But yeah, that's it. So actually relatively simple, especially compared to like Looking Glass. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it and understand the tune a little bit better. And now I'll do a playthrough of the whole thing and you can hear how it sounds. So thanks again for watching.